Hello, my name is Matt and this is Pixel Burn, where I take a look at some of the more interesting things that happened in gaming this week by my own arbitrary definition of interesting. On Tuesday, Ubisoft announced their open world elite hacksaw fest Watch Dogs has been delayed and won't be out until spring 2014. It had been due to launch on November the 22nd, but of course that's not happening now. So the poor overworked dev team who thought they would be home for Christmas now have about 5 or so more months of grueling toil to look forward to. But who cares about poor overworked programmers in an industry that pressures them to slave away for up to 85 hours a week, fighting the overwhelming urge to pitch themselves out the nearest window on their 30th floor cubicle farm because they can't remember what their loved ones look like anymore. What we all really want to know is what this means for people who've pre-ordered a PS4 Watch Dogs bundle. Well, Amazon have promised customers will get their PS4 regardless, albeit without Watch Dogs, and are working on adjusting people's orders accordingly. Meanwhile, US chain GameStop have said customers can get their PS4 on launch day and pick up their copy of Watch Dogs later when it eventually comes out. Both outlets also say customers will be able to swap out their existing pre-orders for a different bundle if they so choose. Whoever you pre-ordered with, you likely won't have to worry about not getting to play your PS4 this Christmas with friends and family, unlike the poor overworked Watch Dogs development team who'll be toiling in the pale glow of a computer monitor while you stuff your gob with eggnog and turkey. So Merry Christmas, Watch Dogs development team! Merry sodding Christmas. Do you remember the game Blizzard All-Stars, formerly known as Blizzard Dota before Blizzard and Valve got into a tiff over the name? Well, it's not called that anymore. It's been rebranded as Heroes of the Storm and has this charming cartoon trailer. And that's all anyone outside Blizzard actually knows about it for now. Moving on. In other news, BioWare's Mac Walters, lead writer on Mass Effect 3, has said the upcoming 4th instalment of Mass Effect may not necessarily have anything to do with former protagonist Commander Shepard in any way at all whatsoever, possibly maybe, ooh aren't we being all fucking cryptic. Which is a bit tricky to wrap my head around considering the fate of the entire Mass Effect universe only depended on Shepard's every decision, except for the last 10 minutes of Mass Effect 3 when Mac Walters and Casey Hudson decided that players couldn't possibly be allowed to ruin the precious jewel of an ending they had so lovingly scribbled on a beer mat down the pub. Speaking of which, Walters also defended Mass Effect 3's ending again, cluelessly insisting fans were only disgruntled because Shepard dies at the end. And not because the last 10 minutes of the game were a layer cake of story inconsistencies, ridiculous info dumps, outright theft of player agency, and plot holes the size of the fucking Death Star. All topped off with a Deus Ex Machina turd of a cherry. A cake made somewhat more palatable by the extended cut, thanks to the rest of the Mass Effect 3 writing team who still don't get the credit they deserve. Anyway, Mass Effect 4 may or may not refer to Commander Shepard and may or may not take place in a post-Shepard Mass Effect universe. Yet with Shepard being such an integral part of how the Mass Effect universe ends up, I can't see how any story wouldn't reference him, or her, in some way. Unless Mass Effect 4 charts the adventures of a bold, volus toilet cleaner stationed alone at the very arse end of the galaxy, in an abandoned Geth space station, with no internet access, or any means of communicating with another living soul in the entire galaxy. Speaking of toilets, UK tabloid newspaper The Sun made itself look a teeny tiny bit foolish this week by confusing video games with reality, which is something they often accuse gamers of when they're not printing headlines saying the 3DS will rip your children's eyes out and then crush them in a vice. According to the Wednesday, October 16th edition of The Sun, in an article about future technology, cybernetic implants created by Sarif Industries will be commonplace to our grandchildren. Yes, the very same Sarif Industries that is an entirely fictional cybernetics corporation, founded by a fictional man named David Sarif in the equally fictional Deus Ex Human Revolution. The article even used a picture of one of Sarif Industries' completely made up cybernetic eyes, cribbed from the very pretty looking Real website set up to promote the game. A website that was incidentally hacked a long time ago by that notorious real life anti-cybernetics terrorist group Purity First. Sorry, I was lying there, they're made up as well, as a cursory Google search would tell anyone with half a fraction of a brain cell. But hey, what else would you expect from a publication staffed entirely by bottom-feeding parasites with zero morals or integrity, who deserve nothing less than to be boiled alive in vats full of their own piss? And while we're on the topic of journalism, I absolutely adore horror games. One of my all-time favourite horror games is of course Amnesia: The Dark Descent, as mainstream AAA horror games have gradually devolved into the equivalent of modern warfare in a cheap rubber Dracula mask. Games like Amnesia have shown that there is still a market for pure horror experiences, ones that aren't shy of leaving you alone, trembling, naked and vulnerable and terrified in the dark, while the little kiddywinks go off and enjoy their modern military ghost train rides. Games journalist Cara Ellison recently conducted an interview for The Guardian with Dan Pinchbeck and Jessica Curry of The Chinese Room, creators of the recent Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs and the slightly less recent arty-farty hiking simulator Dear Esther. The focus of the interview was the divided response A Machine for Pigs received from gamers, or as Cara puts it, Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs has been no less divisive, especially among fans of the original Amnesia title, particularly because the sequel departs from the idea of jump scares and shock, and goes for a nihilistic, languishing, pervasive horror, the sort that stains your memory and has you lie awake at night long after the game has been turned off. Have you spotted the main issue I have with this interview yet? If not, then here's another snippet. This new kind of horror hasn't lent itself to the YouTubers who flourish on the drama of publishing video of the Dark Descent's jump scares. Jump scares? In Amnesia? The original Amnesia has about as much in common with jump scares as my cat has with the Apollo 11 moon landing. It strives to be the very antithesis of jump scares as horror, relying instead, as all good horror does, on building fear through atmosphere, sound, music, and by twisting the audience's own imagination against them. To dismiss Amnesia as a game of jump scares does a tremendous disservice to the work Frictional Games put into one of the finest horror games of this generation. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with jump scares, they're a fine and noble horror tradition, and when done properly can provide a much needed moment of emotional catharsis for the audience. But let me just make something clear, right? This is a jump scare. Play that clip about 10,000 times and you've got roughly 90% of dead space, but I digress. Here's another jump scare, this one from Bioshock. Run away! As is this bit of hot man-on-man action from Outlast. Little pig. This, however, from Amnesia: The Dark Descent's prison level, is not a jump scare. That is giving a player's imagination enough rope to hang them with, otherwise known as doing horror properly. And this isn't a jump scare either, for the record. It's just good old pants-shitting terror. Although this might be considered a jump scare if you suffer from aerophobia, the fear of light breezes. Another issue I have with this interview is how it tries to subtly link legitimate criticism of Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs, namely how it jettisoned nearly all the gameplay, mechanics and interactivity that made The Dark Descent so terrifyingly immersive, with the audience for popular horror gaming YouTube Let's Play channels conveniently ignoring the fact that the only jump scares you'll ever get out of a Let's Play for either Amnesia game is some gurning fuckwit shrieking like a banshee with her tits caught in a bear trap. Hey everyone, Movie 45 here, and I'm going to be playing Amnesia: Dark Descent. Okay, here we go. We're going to go down the corridor. We're going down the corridor now. Yeah. Thus implying anyone who criticises A Machine for Pigs in any way is simply not sharply intellectual enough to appreciate it. Similarly, if they criticise the pretty island hiking simulator Dear Esther, which leads me to my last tiny issue with this interview, namely this quote from Dan Pinchbeck. What I'm really surprised by is that people see Dear Esther as an attack on games. We've destroyed the games industry, according to Total Biscuit. Verily a damning indictment from one of YouTube's most popular gaming pundits. Or would be if he had ever actually said that. No source is given for this quote, and I've never heard it come up in any of Total Biscuit's videos, tweets, forum posts, or indeed anything else he's done. In his first impressions video for Dear Esther, he criticised it for many sound and valid reasons. However, the supposed destruction of the video games industry is not one of them. Total Biscuit has, however, said my channel is the dog's bollocks and you should all totally subscribe to me. Because I too can pull completely made up quotes out of my arse. That and misconceptions about jump scares aside, Cara's interview is an interesting and insightful one, and confirms a lot of my own suspicions about what the Chinese Room intended with Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs, a game I still very much enjoyed, for the record, with an absolute fantastic soundtrack, a distinct setting, interesting themes, and a story that did genuinely stay with me long after I'd finished playing. It just didn't scare the living shit out of me. That's all for this episode of Pixel Burn. If you enjoyed it, then please do let me know. At the very least, I hope you found it tolerable. If you didn't enjoy it, then well, that's entirely your prerogative. I understand your time is a precious commodity and the last thing you want to do is waste it on sweet dreams. Ow. 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 Really hit myself really fucking hard there. Ow. Christ, the things I do for my art.